So yeah, if you want to make like a adobe or clay roof, you can go to under initialize. You can actually turn your cylinder into a kind of pipe, and usually I want to be careful. If I'm going to make a lot of these, I may drop the poly count, so I probably don't need a ton across the length of this thing. So that's the vertical divide. So I may just turn it down to a couple sections. And then the H divide, again, I may just turn down a little bit. You know, if you have a lot of them, they're in the distance, make it really low poly. But in this case, you know, and I try to go in kind of 8 degree increments. So 8, 16, 24, 32, or 36 is fine. I'll do probably just 32 for now. And then I'll go to a front view. This is technically not a poly mesh. I have to go make poly mesh. And then holding Control Shift and Alt, I will hide the bottom polys and delete hidden. Now remember I mentioned ZModeler, this little amazing brush, ZModeler. Right now we've got 2 holes in this thing, so you can, if you go to Edge, I think by default right now it's set to insert a loop, but maybe I'll just go with flat. There we go. Oh my god, too shiny. Yeah, if you hover over edge mode, you can hold space bar and say, you know what, I want to bridge. I want to bridge an edge, so I'm going to go bridge here to here. Hopefully, let me just try to do it from a different angle. Oops. So one, and then we can do that. And it should automatically kind of weld them together as well. So you can kind of quickly fix up. If I was in symmetry, you know, I could do this the same way, especially if the mesh is still symmetrical. There. So that, you know, there'd be a little bit of that kind of maintenance to do. Oh, let me just drop my brush size down so it's a little easier to. There. So it's very specific, you know, to the edges or the type of object you're working on. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm in, facing this thing the correct way. I might just check my floor. So right now I think this thing is facing upwards. I'm going to rotate and hold shift to rotate it 90 degrees. May extend it out a little bit. So I'm going to use a tool called Arraymesh. So it's a kind of like duplicate special, but way better. So if I go to click on Arraymesh, this thing, this subtool is technically still active and editable. But what I can do is duplicate a bunch. Now what I'm going to do in this case is offset, I think, on Z instead of X. So Z. So however many you think you need, you're going to put them out. And by the way, you can rotate these. I don't want to rotate, I think. So right now I'm just going to deal with offset, and then I'm going to increase the repeats. So you probably need them to overlap, and let me just bring down the amount a little bit. So I'll get them to overlap a little bit, and if I go to my original and rotate, I get that. Right? Now, there are a whole bunch of ways to do this. So this you can do in stages. So what you want to do is click on Append New. So that's right over here, Append New. And now you can duplicate that whole row by offsetting on X. And then I increase my repeats. One thing I find a little annoying is that it offsets your offset based on the count. So that's a little bit annoying, but yeah, let me increase this. So that's why I really, if you know you're going to make like hundreds or thousands of copies, you have to watch the mesh count because it can shoot up really, really high. Now, one thing you can do is just have one repeat. So sometimes I think some roofs will actually have, if I grab this, I think I'm going to go to, let me do this. I'm going to take my pivot and reset it to the world. I guess I can't do it on this one, can I? A little goofy. I may have to rotate. I think if I rotate this way, nope. Rotate this way, nope. Rotate this way. So I'm going to rotate 360 on this axis. So some roofs do have this kind of staggered. I don't want to rotate there. I'm going to go back to offset now and just offset in this direction. and then vertically, so that's the Y, drop it down. So you get kind of nice contact. Okay. So that's if you want to go super elaborate. A lot of them are just side by side, but sometimes they stagger like this. And then you have to go append new. So it's saying, I want another stage now. And that's when we make the final kind of offset. So I'll do, I think it's an X in this case. And then increase the repeats. Okay. Now, other interesting thing, as I mentioned, because this is like an instance almost, like in Maya, right? If you have a move brush or something, well, you edit one, they all get edited. Now, there's a couple ways we can treat this. I'm going to show you guys a really interesting component to this, and I've only just, for me, this is still fairly new. You can convert this thing to what's called a nanomesh, and I can explain that in a little bit, but for now, I'll keep it simple with this. If you want to actually convert this to live editable mesh, right now it's just kind of got all these sliders, and it's technically still just this one little original component. You have to click on each. So I go back to my transform stage 1, where I hit append new and append new. You have to say make mesh, and then make mesh. So now this is all editable and sculptable, right? So why is that important? Well, you actually want to, let me turn off this. Let's say you want to warp this thing. What you can do with it is go in to, I showed you guys this earlier, there's the modify option in here. So if you hit the gizmo, so that's W, E, or R, and you hit the little gear icon right here, right? It gives you access to really easily controllable deformers. So you can do a bend arc, bend curve. I like to use deformer soft. So a lot of these roofs have kind of a curvature and a slope and weird angles. So if you go to deformer, basically it's like a lattice control, and it will soften. That's why it's on soft. So if you hold control will remove from the selection. It's a little weird, I find. I don't know why that is. If you control alt will pick points. So now what I can do is say, you know what, I'm going to pull these two up. So that's how you can get these really complex. And I use deformer soft. So again, control, click and drag to deselect, control, alt, click and drag over the points you want to control. I think, am I in symmetry? I can't tell. I believe you actually have to access symmetry here. So you can do, yeah, I think it's a little weird. These cone things are super bizarre, but there is a kind of insane genius behind them too, I guess. Mirror, yeah, it's weird. It sort of tells you when you hover over. Yeah, I'm still kind of getting used to it, but and you can control how many points, by the way, are in here. So you can have a bunch or very few, right, depending on which axis you're on. So in this case, I don't really need a ton. Just clear the selection, so we can pull that up, right? Now, let me just try. I'm not sure which axis to work on here. X. I think I'm on X, so I'm going to say 1 for parallel. Is that right? This is why it's important too to know your, I guess your axes. I should have paid more attention to that, so I may have to play around with this a bit. But worst case, you can always do a mirror after. Anyways, yeah, you can pull this kind of point. There we go. There's my mirror now, so I can get this really cool sloping effect. So control, click and drag, clear. And then we can take these points and really pull them down, right? So you can, fit it exactly how the shape should be. If I needed more divisions on this, and you see once you add more divisions, it kind of resets your changes. But I might need more of these mid divisions because then I want to isolate these and pull them in, right? So you have to be somewhat strategic in your moves on this stuff, So hopefully that helps you out. And once you want to set it, you just click on the gear icon again. It's going to be floating somewhere. As weird as it is, it's actually kind of ingenious. Then you hit accept, and now that's a permanent part of the mesh. Now, this sort of stuff I wouldn't dynamesh together, so you do have to be careful about that, smoothing and everything else. What I do want to do is go back to where it was a full array mesh to show you another interesting option. So if I undo enough here, let's get back. Okay, there we go. So I'll go right before I start collapsing everything. Okay, so in this state, we can do what's called a nanomesh. Convert to nanomesh. So nanomesh is another interesting tool. And if let's say I just create a sphere, and if I make this editable, again, the ZModeler tool, right? The ZModeler tool is powerful for a bunch of reasons because you can, extrude. Really powerful, right? What's cool about it, though, this is something called QMesh. It's actually kind of meant to be a multi-function tool, so it does a bit of extruding. It does a bunch of things at once. If you hold Alt, you can, while you're hovering over a polygon, you can paint in new polygroups, for example. So if I held Alt and painted in this area, and then QMeshed it, it would extrude it. What's cool about this is that if you click next to it, it repeats and can give you a slope. Or if you click over here, it will give you extrusions. It repeats the exact same extrusion depth across the surface. So that's really cool. And there's a whole bunch of really great functionality. Honestly, I watched about 20 minutes of videos to finally learn how to use it. And you can do a ton with 20 minutes of video training. And like I said, if you're hovering over an edge, it'll do something else. If you're hovering over a vertex right now, it's only in move. But what you can do, if you hold spacebar, again, if you're on edge mode, face mode, or vertex, depending on which one you're hovering over, you have different functions. One of the things they developed is this thing called nanomesh, and you can insert a nanomesh on a single polygon, so it's going to drag out a mesh. You can do it by polygroup. I could say by all polys, and what I can do is this. Right? Now that may not make sense, or you may not see a reason why that's valuable, but I've seen people make a little kind of knit pattern with some mesh. So they have a couple like little circular loops, and then they drag it out into a surface, and they can make the whole surface look like a knit scarf or sweater. So it's really cool for kind of making textures and stuff. In this case, what I'm going to use nanomesh for, it does something a little weird, which I'll explain in a minute, but I think I've already converted it, right? I went into Arraymesh, maybe not yet. Arraymesh, convert to nanomesh. So it temporarily puts in these temp meshes to act as a placement. And if you go to nanomesh now, what's really good about this is that you can randomize, you can offset, right? Offset a bunch of rotation here. You can offset, and you can vary things in here, I believe. So you can actually vary your tiles. You can vary the rotation so things look more organic, more chaotic. Yeah, I think I need a little bit of rotation here. Yeah. So you need some rotation to start. So I'm going to see X. Yeah, maybe I'll have them kind of rotate up and down a little bit just by a couple degrees and then vary it so it's not all uniform. So now you get that right organic feel. Now, once you're done with that, Nanomesh takes its own process to actually convert it to a sculptable, editable mesh. It's a little different, a little weird, like many things in ZBrush. You go to Geometry, convert BPR to Geo. So that actually converts that now out of this sort of editable nanomesh and into a sculptable, paintable, whatever mesh. And if you take a look, there's technically like 2 polygroups. There's this stuff, and then I can hide that off. Now, you can see that I'm getting some weird collisions from the under tile there. So usually I just do 1 row on top and then ignore the stuff underneath. But so you want to isolate or hide those planes because that's Nanomesh's placeholder. And we'll just go to delete hidden. And that's it. All right, so now you've got this kind of nice, more organic feeling roof. So really, really fast, really simple. Yeah, if we go into any insert mesh, by the way, can become a nano mesh. So any of these brushes that you can drag out onto the surface, right? So if I go back to maybe a simple, let's take this guy. Right, so if I drag this out, this is an insert. To make a nano mesh, you first have to make an insert, then you have to create it as a nano. So I'll say create nano mesh, and it immediately converts it to this ZModeler brush. So when I drag it out, it'll drag out those parts. But if I wanted to, let's say, put it on the entire surface or on polygroups, I could just say polygroup all. Right? So there might be some really interesting situations where you want to do this. Or if you randomly paint like I said, you can paint polygroups, for example, right? So if I do Alt, so let's say you've got a big plane that you warp for a garbage pile, a trash pile. So I'll take, I think there's already a curved plane somewhere in here, maybe. Yeah, this one. The really lame-ass terrain brush. Go to Make Polymesh, and then if I go to B for Brush, I for Inserts, B for Brush, I for Insert, I believe there's somewhere in here. I may have to go into the Hidden Brush menu. Brushes, I think there's an extended category of inserts, and there's a brick. So what I can do is pick a brick, and then I'm going to, convert that to a nanomesh. Create nanomesh, and then if I kind of randomly paint stuff like that, remember, insert nanomesh, polygroup all. Right? Then I can randomize under the nanomesh menu. I can randomize the. This is really heavy because these are shit, very dense bricks. So I'm already at like millions of polys. See, that's why I said your insert brushes or the brushes that you kind of drag out to the surface. Yeah, I might just totally crash out here, but and just undo. Hopefully I can undo. Oh my God! Stop, ZBrush, stop. So it can be dangerous, but. Yeah, so you can, like I said, you can go back into the nanomesh menu. What are you doing? There. So I'll drag these out. Go to nanomesh, and then, like I said, I can do kind of X rotation, random, Y rotation, random. Right? So then I can say geometry, BPR to geo. BPR, by the way, is the best preview render, so it's actually going to, if you're doing something in ZBrush, it'll calculate real lighting and shadows and stuff. So what we can do now, I believe, is I'll say split to similar parts, so it should split off those bricks. Might take a second because it's 5 million polys worth of bricks. So then if I have like damaged like wood planks and stuff, right? So I'm going to just repolygroup, and then I can Alt paint across randomly here. I'll go back to the kind of hidden menu. I think there's some damage stuff in here, or maybe there's just like rocks, So I'll pick one of these rocks, and then again, you have to make sure it's converted to a nanomesh. And when you nanomesh that, so you can kind of do it in passes and layers. And again, we can play with like the size of these things, or just tell them to be varied in size, in offset, in rotation, right? So you can get something that's more chaotic, more organic.